right, all right. Hey, everybody. Didn't mean to cut that off short, but I'm going to jump right into things. I want to start off with just a little bit of a clip of video here. Hopefully, it'll become clear as we go through what this might be about. I don't know if I might pick it up well or not. Doesn't seem like we'll see. We'll see how we do. All right. Anyway, let's see what this looks like.
We've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
All right, all right. Thought that would. I'll explain a little bit of why I thought that was important. I see Mark. Oh, Mark and Leonard are both here. All right. I always like to contextualize the "I have a dream" speech a little bit, for all my friends out there who forget the first part. You know, especially our. Well, he's not as much my friend as he is yours. New Governor Youngkin down there.
Oh, me, I tell you.
Oh boy!
Don't get us started.
Well,
Yeah,
I do have the text of his first executive order, but I think maybe we can deal with that next week in the when we talk about the reaction to Jesus's mission statement when they try to throw him off the cliff. Maybe this reactionary words of your new governor would be appropriate at that time. But he does quote part the content of character part of the "I have a dream" speech in that executive order. So that's why I thought it was important to lay out the bad check part first. You got to get the check right before you can get the content of character part right. So
well, my favorite thing is we've sanitized Dr. King so much that we really don't appreciate what he said, what he did, and even the response in the Black community to Dr. King, having grown up then and listened to him every Sunday. They would have Martin Luther King speaks, and people would say, well, why are you listening to that? I just was mesmerized by this guy who would get up and be preaching this stuff. And
right.
To see him when he came here to Richmond, the first African Baptist, and then to actually have sung for him one of the last times that he spoke in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was watching something interesting earlier today. It was looking at it was kind of walking through some different newspaper kind of publications, different stories about King during his lifetime, and following that trajectory of his popularity, and then, about 66, 67, as he started to make the statements about Vietnam and on about how, he started getting added to the naughty list in many people's book. But of course, he was unpopular before that in many places just for being, you know, little too demanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at his timeline today, and it's real interesting. I think most people don't realize that he was actually tried once for tax evasion,
Mm,
and but he was acquitted.
yeah.
If you go to that site that they have at the at Sanford University, the
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King Research Center, is
Yeah.
so much there, and I would commend people to take that course. I mean, and it's a self-paced course. I did
Mm-hmm.
the one in 16. They have an updated one for 2021, and they
Nice.
even have courses that you can teach. You know, sixth grade through the 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a way to get around. We can do this in our churches, and we don't have to
Right.
worry about the ban on CRT.
Right.
But Mark, did you see my comment? I think on the one you posted today.
Yeah.
That meant Durham. One of his last speeches was at the National Cathedral,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I was invited to an invitation only event there, and they will have an organ concert for us. And so I asked one of the hosts, could I go into the pulpit, and actually stand where he spoke? And they said, well, why do you want to do that? I said, well, number one, I'm a pastor, but number two, this is where Martin Luther King gave his last speech. So it's chained off. And he removed the chain, let me walk up there,
Wow.
stood before that mass thing. But then I looked down, and they had for everybody who came up there to speak, please speak very slowly. And so I said that. And only then did you realize how mass the place was.
Yeah.
That if you spoke too quickly, no one would understand a word you were saying.
Right. Wow.
Acoustics.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I have a couple more little King clips, because there's no point in if you got the audio, you might as well play them instead of trying to read it yourself. He has a pretty unique speaking voice, to say the least. But talking about Luke 4 and looking at this. I was gonna let me see. I have a little. Let me find I have at least the quotation section where pardon the highlights. This just so the Spirit of the Lord is upon me for it has anointed me to announce good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim to the captives release, to bring sight again to the blind, to set the oppressed in release, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And this little quote just has some places that are omitted and changed from the original, but you get the point. It gets the point across. The idea of the Lord's Spirit, good news for the poor, and then the two releases there kind of sum up and then proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And we can talk some more about all of those things. If I can find my mouse there. Yeah, so that was from that's from the Warren Carter section of that Connections, and I have a few more quotes from him we can look at later, because Warren Carter is a New Testament scholar, but he's done a lot of he has a book on the New Testament and Roman imperialism. So he's done a lot of work on kind of empire and New Testament writing, and he also has a commentary on Matthew, Matthew and the margins, or Matthew at so I think it's Matthew and the margins, which kind of is a I hate to compare it, but it's trying to be kind of like the Ched Myers binding the strong man, political analysis of Mark for Matthew. So Warren Carter does a good job of looking at the imperial, the imperial critique in the New Testament. So I thought he has some good things to say in this part. But we talked about this last week. What else? What? Anything else y'all think about this text as Jesus' kind of mission statement? What?
I was thinking. No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I'm just upset because it seemed like I preached it so recently. I can't preach it again this week. So
Right.
But
Oh,
it's like and really, it just seems like that in my mind, I guess, because I've talked about it so much. I mean, we even had a meeting of the Baptist Cooperative Fellowship, Virginia, and I brought it up when one of the professors, I forgot what school he was talking about it, and he sort of tried to skip away from it too, and that's the thing about this text. People don't want to see it for what it is.
Right.
We were talking about it in one of the forums on Facebook of pastors, and he was saying, no, this is Jesus setting us free from sin. And I said, well, you got to read it in the context, and you got to know the tradition is that Jesus is teaching in that of the prophets, because he's quoting Isaiah, and so he just dropped out the conversation and he didn't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
But you've got this pushback to what Jesus is actually saying. If you really study this, and like I said, context, that's what this is all about.
Right. Yeah.
And I was going to say that this text is within the historical or social context of, I guess, for at least 300 years, that the Jewish community has been in a sort of kind of introverted nationalism because of, first you had the Persians, then you had then the Greeks, and now the Romans. So they've sort of kind of become very introverted. And this text is a coming out party to say, no, we understand the trauma that the community's been through, but the Spirit is pushing us to reach out, because that's what the Lucan community was also saw their mission do, is to reach out. And we think about, I guess for the past 4 years, the nationalism that that the previous administration had called the United States to, and hopefully this administration is reversing that. But so you have this tension of this fight to protect ourselves, but yet the call is to reach out beyond ourselves.
And I'm glad, Mark, you mentioned the Greek, because since most Protestants don't read the Apocrypha, and so we don't know about Maccabees and don't talk about that. We missed that completely. We missed that whole thing about that Greek oppression. And, and it was really about changing their whole way of life, of how they look,
their culture, everything.
That was just so important. And with something else you said, but I've forgotten what.
No, I think, and that's a good. I mean, that's a good point, because and I think you see it in the way that the Gospels also pick up on Daniel as well. The same kind of ideas of all of these forces trying to shift and change who we are, and to take us away from our God and how we understand ourselves as a people. Yeah, I think it's really, this is interesting. This is kind of my issue that I have with King when I when I read Martin Luther King, is he tried so hard to stay really positive about America. You know, at least as an ideal in some
as an
way.
ideal. Yeah.
You know, and I wonder, like, you know, and it just seemed like in some ways that never got him as far as he hoped that it would, you know, to play off the idea, you know, that you could convince people, you know, about the angels of their better nature, you know, or whatever, of the countries, you know, well, you know, this is what he said at this promissory note, like,
Yeah.
you know, like the idea that everybody believes that that's true. And if you just remind them of it, they'll, you know, they might be guilted into doing something about it. It's just, I guess the question is whether, you know, and I think maybe, you know, later on as he begins to critique, you know, Vietnam and imperial kind of maneuvers around the world, maybe that shifts a little bit in his thinking. But I know I always thought it was interesting how he always tried really hard to be to be very positive about that ideal, you know.
I think you see the same tensions in somebody like Malcolm X, who in the beginning of his ministry, I mean, it was very, very self-protect. The black community needs to protect itself. Then when he made that journey to Mecca, it became more global in his thinking. So those tensions are always there.
Right.
And so you got to realize, you know, you got to go back to 1929 when he's born in Atlanta and growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And like he said, you know, when he was a little boy, his best friend was white boy.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he got to be a certain age, you know, all of a sudden they couldn't be friends anymore. And so I think a lot of that, you know, like you said, Mark, that's trauma. Here you got somebody you with all the time and you're separated from, and you want to come back together. And then, you know, in a lot of, look, it was not only a opiate, it was a survival technique to preach the plantation mentality, to suffer and endure. And if, I don't know, y'all read Ralph Warnock's book, The Divided Mind of the Black Church, you know, he realized that and he speaks to it, that, you know, it's still this thing about personal piety versus social justice.
Yep. Those tensions.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking about with you, Mark, I forgot, was the Christian nationalism that we still have.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's what I was talking about in my sermon yesterday, where you got people that don't follow Jesus, but they follow another man.
Yeah. Whew. Good stuff. Well, let me. I don't know if I want to try to get quote, you know, run through all this, but I think what this sums up kind of the you know, the talk about the prophets and the context and all that. Just some of this from Warren Carter, because he's talking about this quote coming from Isaiah 61, saying Isaiah 61 addresses exiles who return from Babylon to the land after 539 BCE. Their expectations of a new creation expressed in Isaiah 40-55 did not materialize. The promised salvation of a flourishing community did not occur amid conflicts over negotiating Persian rule. Isaiah 61 restates the vision of an expected material, somatic, economic, and political transformation marked by prosperity, physical wholeness, and release from Persian rule. So he says that Luke's use of the citation's language maintains the focus on material transformation. Then he goes on to say some stuff about how, you know, trying to dodge the poor as poor, so, you know, so he says while they are included, the crucial observation is that more than 70 to 90% of inhabitants in Rome's world can be classified as poor to varying degrees, struggling either permanently or sporadically with food insecurity and subsistence existence. So there's little reason to avoid this economic reading, even as it embraces those of diminished or marginalized status. We can. There's
I think what he's
more to
referring
say about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think what he's referring to is they called it the people of the land. Those
Right.
70 to 90% that
Yeah.
didn't know where the next meal was coming from.
Yeah. Well, and and it's a most, a lot of, I mean, I think it's just, it's part of what he's suggesting is that, almost everyone who would have heard Jesus or, to some degree, if they were not part of the elite, they were in some existence that was, hand to mouth or close to it, and so for us kind of in our position of relative comfort to kind of try to find ways to negotiate around the language to try to, say, well, it's not, it's not poor the way we think of them. It's more like marginalized people or whatever is kind of, it is those people too, but to think that most of the people were poor, that it was addressing the majority of the people, but then as to Leonard's point that this, not only is that just something we're saying, it's something that is backed up by the tradition that Jesus is quoting from the Isaiah text. And then he goes on to say that, the other language in this Isaiah text and what's used goes back to the Leviticus text and the Deuteronomy text that actually talk about, the release of debts and the release of people from slavery, the letting the land be unproductive and all that sort of stuff, So, yeah. And
because you imagine, being a conquered country and, they had to supply things to Rome.
Right.
So the food, the wine, it wasn't enough for people to begin with, but they still had to send some back.
Right.
So it made it even worse. And, when we look at global poverty right now, it's because, like how much does a person a year make that makes our iPhones for us? Or our tennis shoes, and we don't think about that.
Right.
Right. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's and I think this goes. I have that I don't have to play it, but like near the end of his life, King is talking about this radical redistribution of economic and political power. That this country is not going to change just by people being nice to each other, or people judging each other by the by the content of their character. That can happen. That happens after this radical redistribution of economic and political power. And I think that's exactly what Jesus is hinting at here, that there's got to be a reversal, as we've talked about, or something radical has to happen. And that Jubilee theme, and that's what it's all about, is that a radical reset, on the terms.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking, what do these terms mean now as we look at certain economic realities, such as some of the provisions from the pandemic are expiring? The eviction moratorium expired. And I think I saw, Leonard, that I think close to 1,000 families in Richmond are facing eviction right now.
Yeah, well, it's just not that.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot of the moratoriums for mortgages are expiring.
Yeah, the end of the child tax credit.
Tax credit. So so when we talk about people really needing real relief, I mean,
even a move today in the Virginia Senate to cut off the tax increase. I mean, the minimum wage increase that was passed.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just so much that people are people don't have, and we have so much poverty, but our eyes we don't see it.
And Leonard, I made this comment to you that my wife, we both do grocery shopping, but I went to the store Saturday and I hadn't looked at lunch meat in a long time, and I went to the counter to purchase some lunch meat, and I had to do a triple take at the. I mean, you're talking $11, $12, $13, $14 a pound for lunch meat. And I told my wife, I said, no, I mean, now I really understand why kids need to be in school, because otherwise, how are they eating?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the price of food has gone up so much. I mean, I knew when I go to the store, I knew things are going up, but I was just stunned at the price of lunch meat. I mean, so
Right.
where that price is probably has tripled in the past year.
Yeah.
So we talk about some serious economic realities that people are dealing with.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we traditionally get into this, the traditional kind of way that any talk like that goes is to move toward, some kind of personal responsibility on the part of poor people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Either they made themselves that way, or
Right.
if they would just do this or that better, they would be like this. And one of the things that interesting, I think, about the some of the different things I was reading about this text, and about some other thing, some other tied in text in Luke, is that, Luke really stresses this idea that the this release from debts, this release from oppression, this kind of radical, reversal that happens because God is just, and whenever God visits, whenever God visits God's people, that God does justice among the people,
Right.
and that there's no talk in any of the texts really about, you don't, it doesn't go into the personal life of Lazarus and his failings, or, or like, how he, whatever, drank too much, or what, I mean, or what, whatever, like it doesn't, like, like it does, that's never an issue.
Yeah.
In any of the gospels, really, about what the state of the people are that get healed or
How
made
they got
whole.
to where they are. Yeah.
Like, it's just, this person here has been cast aside by society, and that's not how God wants things to be. So this happens. this thing happens. People get released, period. And then,
well, see, we don't want to know the real reason why people are in those situations, and so that's why we come up with all of these things.
And I think what Dr. King hints at, he hints at the responsibilities of major powers. I mean, I always talk about all the time. We look at, the whole situation in Latin America, that we have to look at, and something Gutierrez talks about in his book Liberation Theology, about the economic policies of first world countries and what they did to put these Latin American countries in this situation so that dictators could rise and their economies were in shambles. So it created it created the scenario for these things to happen, and that's why you have these mass flows. Besides the issue of climate change, of course, that we have to look at what is the responsibility of first world economies to these third world economies, in terms of their policies.
Yeah. Well, prime example is Haiti, and nobody ever wants to talk about that. How do you win a war and have to pay reparations for 200 years?
Right.
Then the United States, they send over and kidnap the president and carry him somewhere. And and then you have you have Christians preachers saying, when they have earthquakes, I mean, that it's like that because of they embrace the devil, whereas we don't need to get in a discussion on voodoo, but it's a combination of native religion and Roman Catholicism.
And then we talk about with the Latin American situation, how the World Bank and major banks created the debt crisis in Latin America that crippled their economies and led to the rise of despots and dictators and the shambles of the Latin American economy. That was first world economies that did that. So we don't ever want to take in or talk about our responsibility in that, in terms of certain macroeconomic policies that were in place.
Well, and I mean, I think the flip side is when those countries try to be self-determining, and when they try to do something outside of the sphere of of United States influence, then they get demonized in our press and by by the people.
Sometimes it's even worse than that, Darren. When I was in D.C., I used to go down to the headquarters of the Pharmacists Association to study. And as I walked there, I would walk by some of the embassies. And one day I was walking, and the president of Grenada was there. And less than 3 months later, there was a coup and he was killed. It's just, and I'm saying, well, what did he tell the administration back then? And they said, no, we're not gonna have you. So they took over.
Well, this is I just saw somewhere on Twitter or somewhere today that this is the anniversary of the assassination of Lumumba in the Congo too. So that another CIA, another CIA. Well, and so before we, I want to I'll play a little bit of this. This fits right in with everything we're saying right here from this little segment from the Riverside time. What is it? A time to break silence. I'll play a little bit of it, and we might get back to more of it. But I think that this goes along with what we were just saying.
These are the times for real choices and not false ones. We are at the moment when our lives must be placed on the line if our nation is to survive its own folly. Every man of humane convictions must decide on the protest that best suits his conviction. But we must all protest. Now that is something seductively tempting about stopping there and sending us all off on what in some circles has become a popular crusade against the war in Vietnam. I say we must enter that struggle, but I wish to go on now to say something even more disturbing. The war in Vietnam is but a symptom of a far deeper malady within the American spirit. And if we ignore this sobering reality, we will find ourselves organizing clergy and layman concerned committees for the next generation. They will be concerned about Guatemala and Peru. They will be concerned about Thailand and Cambodia. They will be concerned about Mozambique and South. We will be marching for these and a dozen other names and attending rallies without end, unless there is a significant and profound change in American life and policy. So such thoughts take us beyond Vietnam, but not beyond our calling as sons of the living God.
You're a good public speaker when there's always a dramatic applause right before the last line of his sentence. Like he builds everybody up. It's always the last sentence before they get, well, and also I wanted to make sure to get that in there since my wife is from Peru, get the
okay, yeah.
Dr. King mentioning Peru. And he goes on to talk about specific examples in those Latin American countries of he talks about justify the presence of U.S. military advisors in Venezuela, the need to maintain investments in Guatemala. Then he goes on to talk about using napalm and Green Beret forces in Peru. So that already picking up on what you're saying about this understanding of kind of the imperialism or the that mode of taking from others in order to benefit a select few.
When you were playing it, I put this quote in today They said when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered.
Yep. That's about 2 paragraphs down from that
Yeah.
part. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
And when you think about it, what has really and that was what 50, 60 years ago. What's changed?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah, and he
changed?
delivered that a year to the day before his assassination.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's all very, I mean, like the names of the countries have changed to some degree, but that's about it. That's about it. Yeah. Well, and I think what's really fascinating to me is, he's really calling out kind of a particular, hitting us, right kind of where we where we stand with it's our way of life and our way of our way of the policies that we make, the way that the wars we support, all of these, these things that really strike home to not only kind of our thinking or whatever, but our real lived lives, like how the way that we live our lives impacts so many people around the world because of where we live and who, and what nation we live in,
Yeah, we still have a sort of kind of a global manifest destiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something he says in that speech that I posted online, he talks about how, and I thought about this, especially in today's technology, that we've done a good job of creating a global neighborhood, but done a poor job of creating a global brotherhood.
Yeah. Oh, so you're just, you're, I don't know how easily I can skip around in this thing, but, oh, I'm not even going to try it because I don't, but yeah, that's where I was going to stop is the, is his comment, talking about basically how there's nothing that can keep us from molding a recalcitrant status quo with bruised hands until we have fashioned it into a brotherhood. Basically talking about how, look, we're the most powerful nation. We have, we have the military, but we also have, everybody deals in dollars. We have the power actually, not only to be on one side to be imperial and to be, warmongering or whatever, but we also have the influence and the power that we could actually be taking the steps toward peace because of the position we're in, and I think
what you said about the dollar is so important because that's how oil is priced.
Right. Exactly.
And most people have missed it. When the Arab Spring occurred, it was because they were talking about changing the way oil was priced. Using another standard rather than the dollar. And we complain about gas prices, but it's much cheaper here than anywhere except where it's produced, because of that.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and I mean, you can well, anyway, you go back and look at about any place that we've declared war on it. Probably somewhere in the recent newspaper articles, they were talking about something they were going to do with gas and oil, independent of our determining, and that'll get you in trouble right away. Well, and of course, I think the way. I mean, well, anyway, that's where we're ending up. Almost, I would say, 70 to 90% of our animus toward China is all about the fact that they have a currency that might compete with ours one day. And they have influence in that way too.
It's not about a might.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to be generous,
No, we just got to be honest about things, and that's why, that's why all of this, how I want to say it, division in this nation bothers me so much.
Right.
Because you've got 1 billion people over there. And then, the government is focused on what they're doing. They have infrastructure and everything.
Right.
But we have a lot. And I mean, when you break down everything, and you got certain people, well, we want this type of government, and then the numbers of millions that are against it. How can we fight that? Just like you said about the house divided.
Yeah. 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 That's so true. So true. Yeah, it's a and I think it's, I think that it's hard for us thinking about this text and thinking about communities of faith. It's hard always in all of these fights because very seldom are any of them looking at how do we take the side of the poor and disadvantaged, and actually make their life better. You end up in these fights
Fights,
that that argue back and forth about a certain layer of society, and we get, we can have fights all day long about Democrat and Republican, but neither one of them care about poor people in the end, and neither one of them necessarily are. I mean, it's becoming even worse than that. I mean, because neither one of them are able to really do anything about so many things now.
And what does it say that on today's his birthday, that two major pieces of legislation look like it's not going to make it? Just like the Voting Rights Act is not going to pass. Wherever you think of Build Back Better, there are some really, really positive pieces of legislation in that Build Back Better Act that will help a lot of people. Doesn't like that's going to pass.
Right.
So I mean, to me, it's significant that on his birthday, we can't get these two major pieces of legislation to pass that would positively affect so many people.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, we I think maybe we have to. I think it comes down again to we have to ask ourselves, who's actually interested in it. I mean, and actually doing it. I mean, we're at that same place again where, I mean, I think what Leonard was saying earlier about, people's opinions about King, especially as he became more kind of militant and particular about, what needs to change and how deeply things need to change, that people didn't have time for him any, to a large extent anymore, and I don't know. It just looks like, I don't know, if Biden is trying, he ain't trying too hard. I can tell you that. And there's a lot of others of them that look, they don't get an A for they don't get an A for effort. I'll tell you that right now.
The clock is ticking on another major issue, and that's Social Security. The trust fund runs out. I think it's by the end of this decade. The trust fund is dry. Right. So I mean, and nobody's talking about that. Right. Nobody's talking about that. So we have some major issues. It's like we don't have the political will to tackle these issues.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what King is talking about here, this significant, the significant and profound change in American life and policy, it didn't happen in his lifetime. Mm-hmm. And come the 70s and on, it just got worse and worse. I mean, from Nixon to Reagan to the Clintons, all the way through it, just, like that those policies just got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
They didn't get better at all. Talk about Haiti.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to go through you don't want to look at Haiti in the Clinton years.
And we look at what the Ronald Reagan administration, we had the rise of what I again call my favorite topic, supply side economics. Right. I mean, he was a champion of supply side economics, which you talk about redistribution of wealth. I mean, right. That just really skewed the income and wealth scales with those policies, which is still being practiced today.
when they changed that tax thing that said, okay, you know, when Reagan came in, companies could only deduct $5 million of a CEO's salary. And then immediately he took the cap off. They could pay those guys whatever they want to. And that's where all the money has gone to. The jobs went overseas. And you know, and we want to blame the Chinese. The Chinese just took advantage of what, you know.
And that's why I keep on saying, Darren, I think that to be serious about this fight, we have to understand macro. We can't fight if we don't know what the enemy looks like. We have to come to a better understanding of what's happening on a macro basis if we're going to be serious about this issue of economic justice.
Right. But I guess to the point of that though is that to go back to what I was saying earlier is that if you understand the depth of the macro issues, you understand that there's not a mainstream media, there's not a Democrat or Republican Party, there's not anything that captures our attention around these issues for 80 to 90% of everything that gets talked about that has any interest in the profound changes that need to happen. They might be interested in a little pick and a little this or that, you know. So this is and I think this is the thing that gets us in as churches. We might be a space that could talk about these things, you know, outside, because we're already not supposed to talk about the Democrats and the Republicans, and we're not supposed to be watching TV anyway. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we're supposed to be reading our Bibles, you know. So I mean, we could be a space that would be free from some of this and actually address these issues,
but they don't want to talk about it,
right?
You know, and that's the most disheartening thing I have about dealing with, you know, with a lot of pastors. I mean, they didn't even want to sit down and have a discussion on spiritual formation using Rick Beholder's book because he had one chapter on racism. So, you know, they didn't want to touch it.
Right. Yeah.
You know, 20 pastors and 4 agreed to do it, you know.
Yeah.
Because the bottom line is because the apple cart's going to get turned over. And I don't know what the world's going to look like if my apple cart gets turned over.
Right. Yeah.
But it will. It's going to get turned over.
Right.
You know, that's right. I don't know why people don't realize that. You know?
Right.
You can't be 6% of the population of the world and continue to control it. You know, even with all of the tricks and, you know, the dollar, all that stuff, you can't do it because everybody sees everything now. You know,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and we're basically at the point that the author suggests in that, you know, in that text that, you know, 80-90% of, especially if you talk about world population, you know, is in this almost poverty category, while there's this 10 to 20%, you know, who are trying to make all the rules and do all well, and pretty much are making all the rules, you know, for how we live our lives. And you know, eventually someone comes along and says, you know, this is not the way that God intended it. we need to do something about it, you know.
And that's what happened in Liberia, you know, because you had slaves move from Petersburg back to Liberia and set up the same system they saw here in the United States. And then in the 1980s, Sergeant Doe said, no, enough. And, you know, I mean, just killed all of them.
Yeah. Well, does anyone want to add a positive note so maybe we don't end?
Well, you know,
on the mass death.
Most people never talk about the sermon, but the sermon at Hope Street Baptist Church in Montgomery, when the boycott movement first started.
Right.
And the part I like about it, he said, if we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. If we are wrong, Jesus was just a utopian figment of somebody's imagination. And I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
for a pastor to say that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
and that was one of his first, real public speaking. But it's so much about King. And I mean, he was a pastor, but he still had a problem with believing in God
Mm-hmm.
until
Mhm.
one night he got a real ugly phone call. And I don't know, he said he went downstairs and got himself a cup of coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a conversation with God, and it
Mm-hmm.
changed his life. And
Right.
that was after he had been brought up in the church all those
Mm-hmm.
years, preached his
Right.
first sermon when he was a little boy,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
been to seminary and everything. So but
Yeah.
the real
Yeah.
relationship didn't come until that dark night in Montgomery.
Right. And
I
that's
think
and that.
to be on a more positive side, Darren. I mean, we saw we saw last year so many young people captivated by the spirit of King in terms of their activism,
Mm-hmm.
and and then I guess that momentum is still kind of waned now that these trials are over. Then the momentum wanes, but the opportunity is there.
Right.
For us as a church to capture the imagination of these young people. We just
Right.
gotta find a way to
Yeah.
do it, because I think they're hungry.
Yeah.
They're hungry.
When I think that the two things, that I think that one thing you were saying, I mean, you were saying, Leonard, about about that spiritual formation. I mean, that's that thing. I mean, that was that for King, right? I mean, that moment of experience and clarity, that's a moment that can carry you on through all the stuff that he went through.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a kind of a grounding point that can take you back to that. And if you don't have a way to if you don't have people helping you to kind of try to foster that, or try to come to that place, or to understand the importance of not just, like you're saying, say the right words and do the right things, but experience the presence of God, among you.
Because I mean, he couldn't have made it when they told him, "Look, here we've taped you.
Yeah.
You better go on and kill yourself."
Mm.
And he could not have said, he knew they were going to kill him. He just didn't know when. That he said, "Tonight I fear no man."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he's been to the mountaintop.
Right.
That's you got to have a relationship.
Got to have a
to get up
connection.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Right.
and I mean, his spirits was still troublesome. There was a thunderstorm that night. And before he got up to preach, sometime when the thunder would crack, you would see him jump because he thought he was being shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just walks out on that deck smiling, and the next thing you know, he's gunned down.
Right. Yeah. But I was going to say to Mark's point about the imagination, is that it's that, again, I think it's that experience and that relationship that grounds your ability to have imagination in the midst of the reality that we all see around us,
Yeah.
to be able to keep pressing to say, yes, I know that it looks like this, but this is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way that it's intended to be. And this is the way that this is the way, this is the vision that's been spoken into my heart.
Yeah.
So I know that it has to be true,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think, you definitely see that. You definitely see that in King, especially later in life, having gone through all that, to be able to just keep saying, look, there's a beloved community that we, there is this, yeah. Anyway. Well, good. Well, I'm tempted to, this, I don't. Oh shoot! I've showed it a couple times, but this it's called The Gospel in Solentiname. It's a bunch of sorry. I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
Let's see if I
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
So it's Ernesto Cardenal was a priest in Nicaragua during the revolutionary years there.
Okay.
And so he met with these, he would have these meetings, he would just have these Bible studies with these peasants, and they would read through the text, and then they would talk back and forth with each other. And reading through this text, one of the guys, they're talking about the holy year of the Lord, or the year of the Lord's favor. And one of the guys says, a holy year is what's been done in Cuba. So talking about Latin America and so
And,
just
I've heard about that book, and I never have picked it up.
Yeah.
In fact, when I took Dr. Blunt's course on interpreting the New Testament, he brought it up. But
yeah,
I got to pick it up one day.
Yeah.
there's some really good. It doesn't have the picture. It doesn't have the pic. There's some pictures in this one, but it doesn't have the picture that Dr. King always talks. That Dr. Blunt always talks about. I thought it was in here, but it's not. No, it's good. And of course, well, anyway, we won't go back. We won't go into that all of that. But
Text out that title, Darren, to us so I can jot that down.
yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put it over here too.
Okay.
I always have to remember how to spell.
You're not the only one.
Luckily, it's Spanish, so at least it's phonetic.
Okay.
That's always helpful.
Yeah.
And Sulintanami is like a little island in the kind of in the lake there in Nicaragua. So it's a pretty anyway. But it's good stuff. Well, anyway, yeah. So what are you preaching on this Sunday, Leonard? You said you weren't gonna go back to this one.
I'm still,
Still deciding.
Yeah, I'll have it in the morning. But
Yeah.
Well,
No, I hear you.
I went to print the text out. I've read them all. And,
Yeah.
But I think the Nehemiah text is the one I'm leaning towards.
Yeah.
Well, because it's to me it speaks to what worship is about. And especially the part about understanding. And then when it's over, have this feast, encourage those who need.
Right. And what's which text is it from Nehemiah again?
Oh, I see. Like I said, for some reason I couldn't print it out.
Yeah, let me.
But it's in the it's in the lectionary.
Yeah, I was just looking. I was just. I don't. Sorry to keep to take us back again, but one of the things I was looking at was this idea of release of debts. And I was reading. I was reading that part, and I'll do it again. I'll see if I can make it. This is N.T. Wright's book on Jesus, Jesus and the Victory of God, and he talks about. He says the first act of the Jewish war in AD 66, they broke into the treasury to burn the debt records. So if you imagine, like, this is the first thing that they do in that war is they break into the treasury and they burn all the debt records so no one has to pay any of their debts. And he says although Jesus did not envisage that he would persuade Israel on a whole to keep the Jubilee year, he expected his followers to live by the Jubilee principles among themselves. And he talks about Deuteronomy 15 in Acts 4. But then he also talks about looking at, in Nehemiah, in Nehemiah 5, is also attempting to deal with debt and slavery, in the renewal of the covenant that Nehemiah tries to do as well. So I was just thinking that those fit to. I'm sure that they intended those to fit together. Some of that Nehemiah stuff to fit together with this as well. But I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, this one is Nehemiah 8:1-10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking about this whole debt issue, one of the most pertinent debt issues today is this whole student loan debt issue. which is I think the Biden administration extended that student loan debt repayment moratorium, but when that bill comes due, that's a monster too. That a lot of people are struggling with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting group that's kind of been working on that and doing a lot of work. There's an interesting book about it, but that I'll have to. I think it's called. I think it's called "Can't Pay, Won't Pay."
Okay.
But what's interesting is that they were talking about going on debt strikes at some point, and people are kind of saying, well, when are we going to do it? Because we need to get it done. We need to start doing it now because we're in trouble. Yeah. So anyway, no, you're right. That's a big one.
That's a big monster. Yeah.
Debt that
and
all different. I mean, and basically, the thing is that again, since the 70s and on, like, that's also been the rise of this, basically saying to the average consumer, you need to live on debt. You need to, we're not going to raise your wages. You need to just like extend it out over 20, 30 years,
and then also
whatever
the problem is the cost of higher education has been, those prices have been going up at least 2 to 3 times what the inflation rate is. Tuition going up 9, 10, 11, 12% a year, which, and then there's no other avenue of student of financial aid. The majority of that financial aid becomes the loan.
Right.
So now student undergrads are leaving owing what, 30, 40, and God knows what, graduate students and health professional students, that debt is unreal.
Yeah, it's even gotten into the cars. It's a dealer down in Tidewater, and he says if you got negative ownership of the car, we'll finance that.
Because people are going 7 and 8 years to pay for a car. 7 and 8 years.
Yeah. No, it's it's getting
and I got members of the church that paying 25% interest for a car loan.
Yeah.
If you got money, you can buy Mercedes Benz for 1.99. Now, does that make any sense?
Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
Now, while we're closing out, I just want to keep the family of one of my professors, Dr. Henry Mitchell. He died last week. Dr. Mitchell taught me when I was at STVU. So we want to keep his family in prayer. A great loss to the STVU community this week.
I never met him.
Yeah, he was there. He taught me. I can't remember. He wasn't the dean when I was there. But he taught homiletics and church history. He taught me those 2 subjects when I was at STVU. So him and his wife Ella, they were both part of the community at the time.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll certainly do that for sure. All right, y'all. We'll keep Marcy in our prayers. She was on the road. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully, she made it safe to her location. And
I'll text her. What's on tap for next week?
So next week is the text right after this text. So the reaction of the people, saying, isn't this the carpenter's son?
Okay.
And then they, trying to run it. Yeah, trying to run him out of town. So, and maybe we can look at, maybe we'll look at
20 through 28. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll look at Mr. Youngkin's.
Oh man!
Oh boy!
Yeah,
finding out what's behind that smile now.
Yeah. Yep.
And what he did, he put forward. He put like 13 or something executive orders through, like today.
Orders and then 3 something else.
3 something, some other kind of things that they're called. Yeah. Well, And we won't go on to the lieutenant governor either. That's the whole.
Or the attorney general.
Attorney General, yeah.
And I mean,
Ooh.
have you heard about the new parole commission?
I saw that they disbanded. The executive order was to disband the.
Yeah, well, he has a sheriff on there, he has a prosecutor on there, and then the woman police officer that got shot and so bitter, she's on there. So don't expect if you get 10 paroles in the next 4 years, and these are people who have been in jail since before 1990.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Mark, we that text we talked about on
Saturday.
Yes,
Saturday. Yep.
Yeah. No, it's yeah. Well, and I mean the thing about it is that this is going to become a blueprint for I'll be talking about the same thing in a month by whatever year the governor gets elected again in this state. It'll be this this will be the blueprint everywhere.
Lock them up and throw away the keys.
Throw away the key. Yeah.
And I'm sitting here before I started, I got a presentation to make at one of the jails tomorrow, and just the money that is being spent at each one. It's all about money. And sure, I'm getting paid to do it, and I'm trying to make sure things are best for the inmates. And there's all mental health issues. It used to be HIV.
Yeah. No, it's it's crazy. There's there's it's like that whack-a-mole game. One issue you think you can tackle, you think you get after one issue, and then there's so many other ones. Yeah. No, for sure. No, that's terrible, because there's been so much good work by people on in so many criminal justice kind of avenues that it's probably all going to get scrapped. Down there. That's just rough.
Environment too, but he said he admitted today he couldn't do what he wanted to do. About pulling out
that thing. Yeah. Okay.
He can't. Oh, really?
Yeah, he admitted today he couldn't do it executively. So I don't know.
Well, that's something at least. Yeah. That regional green. Yeah. All right. Well, we could. Unfortunately, we don't want. Well, let's go before we come up with the next issue that we need to,
okay. Have a good.
We can talk about more of next week. Next week we could talk about all the people having their bad.
We'll know a little bit more next week too.
Yeah. All right. Good talking to y'all.
Good talk, y'all. Y'all be safe.
Yeah.